Hello, I'm Eric Schmid, a shareholder in Elliott Davis's manufacturing and distribution practice. We're continuing with our multi-part management consulting video series titled An Operational Discussion. These are short videos, about 20 minutes, but pretty packed in terms of content, and that's definitely true for what we've got today. You'll see here an overview of the first 3 installments of this series, and then after today's, the next 2 will deal with the subjects of project management and IT strategy. So today we've got number 4, which is improving operational performance. Joining me for today's is Brent Emerson, a member of our management consulting practice. Brent spent pretty much his entire career on the front lines of operations, and so he's ideally suited to be our subject matter expert for today's discussion. I'm going to turn over to Brent momentarily, but I want to take a second and kind of frame the discussion today and provide a very simple outline of what we intend to be covering. I will say, on the subject of 20 minutes, this one out of all of the videos we're going to be delivering is probably the hardest to fit into a 20-minute package. So know that this is definitely just scratching the surface. So framing. This is not about COVID. We know COVID's real, it's been impactful, it continues to be, and it's changed business priorities and relative urgencies on things that businesses are trying to do. But today is not about COVID. Today is more about operational improvement for the long run. That's what we're focused on today. In terms of what we're going to cover, so the basic bookends, we're going to have brief commentary at the beginning on kind of indicators that a company may need to improve its operations, and sort of the back end of the discussion will be indicators that suggest a company may not on its own be able to achieve the improvement they're looking for. But between those 2 bookends, the real meat of what we're talking today is basically the building blocks of operational improvement, including a number of examples. So with that, Brent, let me hand it over to you. Quickly introduce yourself in the MCS practice, and then we'll jump into the content.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. That was a great introduction there. I mean, my background, honestly, folks, I'm Brent Emerson. I'm the lead of our continuous improvement business optimization practice at Elliott Davis, as well as project management practice. And my background really stems from growing up on the shop floor throughout a number of southeastern manufacturing facilities and learning process engineering, learning quality management, learning project management, and then transitioning over recent years to this concept of value engineering and process improvement, efficiency improvement to ultimately serve customers in a more meaningful way. From this, I've learned to apply various Six Sigma and Lean tools to ultimately deliver extraordinary value through efficiency back to my employers and clients. And so I'm excited to share some of that information with y'all today.
Okay, and just like 15 seconds on our practice generally.
So at a high level, our practice is very focused on a number of very meaningful operational disciplines. We help companies with strategy. We do project management. We help with rapid transformation as well as turnaround and recovery. And we do a lot of work with clients on business optimization, Lean, Six Sigma, and then focused efforts on technology strategy, and really managing technology resources.
Okay, good. So let me jump in with the first question, kind of one of the bookends of our conversation here today. So there are clearly going to be cases where it is obvious that a business needs to improve its operations, perhaps urgently needs to improve, but sometimes it's going to be less obvious, and yet the need for improvement is still there. So in a case where it's not obvious, what might a company do or think about doing that might help sort of identify opportunities that are there and actually achievable?
That's a great question, Eric. So the way that I look at it is many times operational efficiency identification and opportunity identification is really driven off of symptoms, right? So if you look at your respective company and you see things like a backlog that continues to grow And despite, significant efforts to drive it down, there's really little or no movement. You see poor operating efficiency, or OEE, downtime on machines, a number of really symptoms that are pain points for the business and just challenging to deliver excellent customer service. That's typically an indicator that there's an opportunity for improvement, an opportunity to drive some efficiency. I mean, the other is a lack of measurement systems. So many businesses that we come in contact with really focus on production numbers and throughput. And those are important, but it's really about making the right product at the right time, in the right amount for the customer. And that's really how you drive operational efficiency.
Okay. So just kind of getting into the meat here, I know from prior conversations we've had, Brent, that when you are facing, you're on an operational improvement type project, you're typically going to think about, I think, 5 key inputs into the process you're looking at. Just briefly, what are those 5?
Sure. So there's a lot of different ways you can slice and dice operational efficiency, but we typically categorize opportunities for improvement in the area of people, materials, methods and processes, equipment and machinery, and the environment. And then we kind of there's a straggler on there that's really more about measurement and KPIs, which I mentioned earlier. But that's a key component that kind of overarches the other 5 to make sure that really focusing on the right things and sort of driving things over the finish line and benefits are being realized.
Okay, so let's ambitious task here, but let's try to touch on as many of those as we can. So you started with people. Just describe a little bit from your experience some approaches a company might be able to take to use their people to achieve sort of optimal operational efficiency.
Sure. So as I think about people and my experience over the years, I've always been a very much a hands-on type of manager, engineer, and really sort of openly communicated with shop floor associates, managed by walking around. And that's become more and more prevalent for world-class organizations in the manufacturing world these days. So the first, key to really getting optimum efficiency through people is sort of leveraging that technique of management by walking around and just engaging on a day-to-day basis. As I look at sort of driving operational efficiency, people really are the foundation for all of that. So I firmly believe, and my experience tells me that problems can't be solved in conference rooms with a group of mid-level managers, right? Problems are solved on the shop floor, leveraging the expertise of the people that are in those processes every day, in the trenches. And when those folks are empowered and they're heard, that's really when change can occur through people, and efficiency can be achieved through people. One recent example that I can cite is really a transformation that we worked with a company on, and through empowering people, we saw our client get about a 50% increase in overall operating efficiency. And there were a number of small changes, but ultimately sort of making those metrics transparent to the operators, letting the operators know that their voices were heard, trying some new things, evaluating different ways of doing things, and just sort of creating high performance work teams really drove some massive improvements. And then we could start to do some of the more technical troubleshooting techniques on the other areas of operational improvement. But like I said, empowering people is really the foundation for operational improvement success.
Okay. I think the next one you mentioned was materials. Talk a little bit to some levers a company can pull, and I think you indicated you've got an example that you can share where material was important to efficiency or inefficiency.
Yeah, I mean, material, it can be a straightforward one, but it can also sneak up on you. As you think about cost of goods sold and operational efficiency and manufacturing, right? The mix of material to labor costs can be different depending on what you're manufacturing, right? And highly automated environments, the cost of raw materials can be a significant contributor. In some of the less automated environments where there's a lot of material or labor converting a material to a finished good, where we have a very different model in terms of improvement. But I can think of an example where I worked with a vinyl siding manufacturer in the building and construction industry, where a company was able to achieve several $1 million in savings just by optimizing their material usage. And when I say optimizing their material usage, they had a specification, and because operators and the team were comfortable operating at the high end of the specification, uh, they essentially consumed a significant amount more material than they needed to. And just by shifting to the lower end of the specification, still in control, still making good product, still achieving the same throughput, they were able to basically drive down their material consumption by about 10% and save millions. So, material really is one of those ones where I think people have a tendency to take it for granted, but there's definite opportunity to drive efficiency and optimization by thinking about material consumption in different ways.
Okay, Brent, another one was method, which I don't know if that's somewhat synonymous with process, but first of all, just speak very briefly to what does the term method basically encompass?
Yeah, I mean, I look at methods as the art and science that a manufacturing operator or a manufacturing work team are using to convert a product to a finished good, right? And many times those methods are generated from leadership teams. Many times they evolve over time. Many times an operator, modifies the operations or modifies those methods to best suit their needs and to make their lives easier and to drive throughput there. But method is really the approach the operator uses to sort of do their job on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, all right. Um, so there's a people element to that, and I know from the discussions we've had before and projects I know that you've been on. I think you're a strong believer in the idea that the ultimately the operational efficiency or inefficiency is kind of in the hands of the operators, and and I know you've seen cases where kind of alluded to it there where an operator may be engaging in a practice that is suboptimal, may not be willing to acknowledge it or reluctant to change. And I know you've had to step in sometimes when that's the case. Can you share one of those stories?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, right, as we look at methods and operations and we think about the challenges of running a manufacturing facility on a day-to-day basis, your operations managers, your plant managers spend a lot of time, fighting the fires of the day and making sure they have the right people in the right place at the right time and getting down into the weeds of standard work and operating procedures is sometimes challenging when you're just trying to make sure you can block and tackle on a
Yeah.
daily basis. So as I look at situations where methods have yielded significant results, and I've got an example I'll point to here. We recently worked with a client on something that's as simple as handling waste on a day-to-day basis. So lots of different materials being processed, lots of different types of materials ultimately converted into injection molded products. But the team would handle those materials through essentially consolidating them together, sending them off to a reseller, and just by putting together some rigorous processes and separating those raw materials, they increase the value of it significantly, right? And then the bigger thing is by separating.
You mean what they were getting? Are you saying what they were getting from the reseller, or
Right, because it ultimately changed from mixed scrap to a specific type of
okay.
scrap, which had a higher value. But I think the more important thing is the company was able to consume most of that recycled material internally after they implemented these separation processes. So they were able to replace, what I would describe as virgin material at $1 a pound, right? With something that they may have been getting 10 cents per pound on the open market for. So there's a huge financial benefit just by putting some work elements in place, some training, some operators, and the feedback from the shop floor was really the thing that was the most amazing about that particular situation. Is the operators are like, I've been saying we should have been doing that all along. I'm so thankful to see this. So really. A simple example, but very tangible financial benefits back to the company
Yep.
and the employees.
Okay. Another important input, machine, and maybe a little bit of a Murphy's Law undercurrent to this question. I suspect from time to time it does occur that your most critical piece of equipment breaks down at the worst possible time. I know that's just one element of machine, but just share some thoughts on machine efficiency.
Yeah, so machine efficiency is an interesting one because as we think about employees and how they approach their day-to-day job, whether it's a maintenance technician, a maintenance manager, they look at equipment as sort of this fixed entity. Like machine A constantly gives us problems. It's always been that way. It will always be that way. And ultimately, I think we need to take a different angle as we look at machine efficiency. Um, we need to, not accept the status quo related to machine performance and start to get into a more proactive approach versus a reactive approach. Now, some of the things that companies do to facilitate that process is they'll go through what I describe as maintenance priorities, ultimately assigning a 1 to X priority on the equipment, based on backlog, customer demand, throughput, the operating condition of the equipment, those kinds of things. And so that can help facilitate the transformation around driving equipment performance. And then the other piece is really measuring the amount of reactive maintenance versus proactive maintenance, getting a long list of, okay, if we look at this critical piece of equipment, what spare parts do we need on hand? What's the typical time to failure? How do we put measurement systems in place to really capture what's going on with a particular piece of equipment? And then, functionally just creating some visibility to things that weren't typically visible and getting folks out of that mindset of how do we improve something that the staff has this cultural file that just can't be improved from a maintenance perspective. So we've got an example here where we worked with a client to kind of focus on downtime elimination and equipment challenges, and we're able to basically cut it in half through using some of these techniques and really focusing on the big buckets of downtime drivers and things where we just basically eliminated a lot of non-value added activities and activities that we took for granted and put some measurements just systems in place. So I think those are really good places for companies that are challenged with downtime and availability issues to kind of get started and get the ball rolling and get things going in the right direction.
Okay. I know we're kind of coming up on our time. A couple more things. I want to hit one more of kind of the process inputs that you mentioned, and then close out with a final question. So you mentioned environment, and to me, environment's kind of nebulous and hard to exactly define, pin down. And I can also imagine that in a business that views machines and technology as being of paramount importance, the role that environment potentially is playing in efficiency or inefficiency could be overlooked or just somehow missed. talk briefly to a couple of things that you think of when you use the term environment, and then just anything else you think might be useful for our listeners to hear.
Yeah, I mean, again, the environment I think is one that often gets overlooked in terms of its contribution to operational efficiency. And I would say, depending on the industries, it can be a huge impactor. One thing that comes to mind related to environmental factors is just the overall 5S, or cleanliness of the operation. So, can products and people flow efficiently through the shop floor? Has the team taken steps to create an environment where efficiency is enabled? And is there an active 5S program? Are folks cleaning up before the start of the shift and at the end of the shift? Are things handed off in a clean and efficient manner? And then the next piece I think about related to environment is the environment set up with all the right tools at the operator's hands and fingertips to do their job in the most efficient manner? But then once we get sort of past the layout component, there's another piece related to just the environmental conditions themselves, right? I can give an example. At one point I worked with a manufacturing facility where they saw huge issues this time of year with rust. And, as humidity and temperature rose, so did the amount of scrap that was generated as a result of rust. And some of their troubleshooting activities ultimately resulted in changes to the ambient environment. And folks, sometimes take those things for granted in terms of how they might impact the overall finished goods. I mean, the one example that we've, depicted in the graph here really centers around sort of the concept of kitting and preparing the environment for success. So in this particular case, through a Kaizen type approach, we basically laid out the work environment or the work cell in a way that operators could, drive 20% more production just by having things right there at the ready and being able to efficiently flow things through the work cell. So the environment, although it seems like it's so simple and trivial, can be a huge contributor to really driving operational efficiency.
Okay, we're probably over on our time, but I got one more question, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds for this one. So a business, oftentimes is going to have the internal resources, mindset, whatever, to solve their problems and to get whatever achievement, operational improvements they're aspiring to achieve. But that's not always the case. Couple of examples, maybe, Brent, of facts and circumstances, indicators that should be telling a business that they can't entirely solve the issue on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really fair to only give me 30 seconds on this one, because this is sort of justifying my existence. But ultimately, I'll give it a shot, right? So some of the indicators that external help may be beneficial. One is there are more challenges than there are people to solve them, right? Demand is significantly greater than capacity. And we see that with a number of folks. They just say, hey, our business is growing, but we're overwhelmed. Can you help us? Another indicator is related to you see problems within your business, and your team has taken multiple shots at trying to solve those problems and just haven't been successful. And that's a great time to extend the olive branch and partner with someone like a consulting firm to get things underway. And then finally, you're not achieving the improvements at the pace or the transformation speed that you'd like to see happen. So we provide an additional set of expertise and resources to support rapid transformation. And so that's another area where I could say, hey, definitely reach out and get some help so that you can achieve the business results you'd like to see.
Okay. All right, Brent, on this video, no more time to justify your existence. Good stuff. Thank you. Want to thank, viewers and listeners. We're always here to help. And folks like Brent are always happy to just even engage in exploratory kind of discussions on how, we might be able to support a business. So with that, Thank you.
Thank you.